My mom is threatening not to attend my wedding if I don't let my stepdad walk me down the aisle instead of my uncle, but then she changes her mind because she missed the chance of a lifetime with one of the guests. I, a 26-year-old woman, am getting married to my fiancé, 28 male, with whom I've been in a relationship for 3 years in a couple of months. We've been engaged for the past 7 months, and last week I asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle. My uncle, 55, is my dad's older brother and has been practically the only father figure I've had in my life because my biological father passed away when I was just 4 years old, and I barely have any memories of him. My mom, 48, was a working woman, and as a real estate agent, her job required her to be away for long hours. So I ended up spending a lot of time with my uncle and his family, and honestly, I think of my uncle, aunt, and cousins as my close family. I also love my mom, don't get me wrong, and I value and appreciate everything she's done for me throughout my life, because I know it must not have been easy to raise me without her husband by her side, but I also care deeply for my uncle and his family. When I asked him to walk me down the aisle, he accepted without hesitation, and we were both very happy. However, when I told my mom, she wasn't too pleased with my decision. She told me I should have at least consulted her before making such an important decision, because she had hinted to my stepdad that I would ask him, and he might feel hurt. For the record, my stepdad has only been in my life for the past few years, and while we get along, we aren't particularly close. So I don't know why my mom would hint to him that I'd ask him to walk me down the aisle. I don't consider him a father figure, and to me, he's just my mom's husband, nothing more. Maybe I would have considered him if he had made any effort to be more involved in my life, but that never happened. So I don't see any reason to feel bad for not asking him. He and my mom started dating 8 years ago and have been married for 5. So I wasn't exactly a child when I met him, and unlike my uncle, he's never played an active fatherly role in my life. I explained all this to my mom, but she wasn't happy and insisted I should ask my stepdad and replace my uncle because she thought my uncle would be more understanding. But she had already hinted certain things to my stepdad and didn't want him to feel excluded. I don't know why it's my responsibility to make him feel included, but I stood my ground and told my mom it wasn't going to happen. I thought my uncle deserved to walk me down the aisle, and it was my wedding, so ultimately it was my decision. This happened 3 days ago, and while we were on the phone, she just hung up without bothering to argue further with me. When I said it was my decision, and I wasn't going to change my mind, I thought that would be the end of the discussion. But later that day, she visited me and brought up the same topic again. She wanted me to replace my uncle with my stepdad to walk me down the aisle because it would make him feel good, and eventually, we could build a better relationship. It was quite exhausting because I was already very busy with work and wedding preparations, and this was the last thing I needed on my plate. I was too agitated to talk to her, our voices got louder, and the arguments started heating up. She was extremely stubborn, and I wasn't going to budge, so we just kept going in circles. At one point, she thought it would be a good idea to threaten me, saying she wouldn't attend the wedding unless I asked my stepdad to walk me down the aisle and made my uncle step aside. I got really angry because this was my own mother, and here she was, threatening not to attend my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, over something like this. To me, it was very obvious that my stepdad's feelings were more important to her than mine. So in the heat of the moment, I told her she was free not to attend my wedding, and I added that since she had made that decision, I guessed she'd also be okay with missing out on meeting a very special guest I'd invited just for her. I had been planning to surprise her on my wedding day by introducing her to this woman, but now I'm not sure if that's necessary because of her behavior. The guest I'm talking about is practically a legend in the real estate world. She runs one of the biggest real estate firms in the city, and my mom has always admired her and has been looking for an opportunity to work with her since she plans to start her own business. It turns out she's a very close friend of my mother-in-law, as they've known each other since college. When I discovered this connection, I immediately asked my mother-in-law to invite her because I knew it would make my mom very happy to meet her. I wanted to surprise her on my wedding day by introducing her to this guest. However, when my mom told me she wouldn't attend my wedding if I didn't ask my stepdad to walk me down the aisle, I had a bit of an outburst. I guess all the stress was getting to me, so I told her there was no longer any need for her to be at the wedding. As soon as I said that, she completely changed her tone and started saying I was now being very unfair because she had only said she wouldn't attend my wedding to pressure me into asking my stepdad. She claimed she had no idea there would be such a special guest at the wedding. If she had known, she wouldn't have been pressuring me to do anything. But I told her she had already said what she had to say, and now I knew that for her, my stepdad's feelings were more important than what I wanted for my wedding. At that moment, I was very angry, so I couldn't care less how she felt about all this. I asked her to leave because I was very busy with work and wedding preparations, and I couldn't deal with this as well. I told her I was very upset after our fight and had no intention of listening to her because my blood was boiling at the way she was acting. I just wanted her to leave so I could think about what I wanted to do. Then I stood up and so did she. But she started pleading with me and said she was taking back everything she had said and only wanted to be at the wedding now. However, I was in such a bad mood after our argument that I kept insisting she leave. When she tried to stay and argue, I started yelling and told her I just wanted her to leave because I was too stressed to deal with this right now. I told her I really didn't care if she wanted to attend or not. She had put me in a very difficult position and had been incredibly selfish, so now she had no right to make any demands of me. I said I'd think about it and talk to her later, but at that moment I had nothing else to say to her, and if she kept pushing, it would only make things worse for her because her behavior was upsetting me too much. Finally, she left, but she looked very unhappy that I had forced her to leave without fully committing to letting her attend the wedding. Once I managed to calm down and spoke to my fiancé over the phone, he was away on a business trip for a week. I decided to think about whether I wanted her at my wedding after all this, because on that same day, I was still quite upset with her. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave for work, I had planned to reach out to my mom a few days later to try to sort things out. However, she couldn't give me the space I needed to cool off. She showed up at my house early in the morning, right as I was about to leave for work. She knew my schedule, but she came anyway and started talking about whether she was still invited to the wedding or not. Instead of apologizing, she began trying to justify herself. She told me that my stepfather had apparently been feeling very excluded during the wedding preparations. To cheer him up, she told him that I might ask him to walk me down the aisle so he wouldn't have to worry and would feel like part of the family. She also said he had always been insecure about his place in my life and about my uncle in general, because he felt my uncle was treated like the man of the family due to the way I regarded him. He always felt threatened by my uncle, and that's why she had hinted that I might ask him to walk me down the aisle. Honestly, I can understand the impulse to tell your partner small white lies to make them feel better about certain things, but I don't understand why she had to do it at my expense. She knew I had no intention of doing what she implied, and she was fully aware that my stepfather and I had never been close. By raising his expectations so unrealistically, she was essentially setting him up for disappointment. Instead of simply apologizing and leaving it at that, she kept trying to tell me that she had insisted on this the other day only because she didn't want her husband to feel bad. She said that after I got married, I'd understand why she was acting the way she was, but that her behavior wasn't a reason to exclude her from the wedding guest list. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much we fought, she was still my mother and deserved to be there. I tried to tell her I'd discuss this with her after work, but she insisted I had to commit to including her in the wedding. I tried saying yes, just to get her to leave me alone so I wouldn't be late for work, but then she started again, saying she wanted me to at least speak to my stepfather and explain why I had chosen my uncle. She didn't want to be seen as the bad guy because of my decision to ask my uncle to walk me down the aisle. That's when I finally lost my patience. Not only was she making me late for work, but she was also wasting my time with her demands. I had already told her she was welcome to attend my wedding just to get her off my back, but now she was asking too much by demanding I speak to my stepfather. I had made no promises to him. Why should I be the one to talk to him and break this news? In fact, I don't even think I need to tell him anything about the wedding. It's not like I'm discussing my wedding plans with every guest, so why should he get special treatment? To me, he's just another guest. As we stood at the door, I told my mom to leave me alone because I had had enough of her. I said she was wasting my time and that I could understand she was really desperate to ensure my stepfather felt validated. But it wasn't my responsibility to validate his feelings, it was hers. I didn't care how she managed it, but she was in no position to make demands of me. She then started talking about motherhood, saying she had raised me on her own and that this was the least I could do for her. I decided to confront her and reminded her that she had never done it all on her own. She wouldn't have reached this point in her career without all the help she had received from my grandparents, my uncle, and his family. So that idea of having raised me all by herself wasn't something I was willing to accept. That's when she started calling me ungrateful, and I finally told her I had made a decision and was now certain that I didn't want her at my wedding. I then walked away from her, got in my car, and drove off as quickly as I could. It took me a long time to calm down, but even after that, she wouldn't leave me alone and kept trying to call me while I was on my way to work. As soon as I got to my workplace, I blocked her and tried to focus on the day ahead, but it was useless because when I got home, I realized she had been waiting at my house or had come back again. As soon as she saw me, she ran up to me and said she knew I couldn't have been serious about not wanting her at my wedding. But by then, I had had enough, and I told her I was absolutely serious. Judging by the way she was acting, it was unlikely I'd change my mind before the wedding. I told her she was acting unhinged and needed to leave my property. Unfortunately, my fiancé was still away at the time, so I couldn't rely on him to rescue me from the situation. She just stood there trying to reason with me, but I kept telling her to leave me alone. Eventually, I snapped and told her I'd call the police if she didn't leave, even pulling out my phone to show her I meant it. That's when she started crying and said I was being really cruel, and that she couldn't believe I was treating her this way despite everything she had done for me. I told her I didn't want things to end like this, but she had forced my hand over the past few days, and now I had no choice. She had been pushing my patience, and I needed her to leave me alone. After crying for a while, she finally left. It's been a couple of days since then, and now I'm feeling a bit guilty. I've talked about all of this with my fiancé, and he believes I did what was necessary. But even so, I feel bad about it, and neither of us knows how to deal with the situation because the guilt is absolutely overwhelming. He came back last night, and we were finally able to sit down together and talk about what I've been going through. It's clear that I'm very stressed from the wedding preparations and the extra workload I've been taking on, which may have made me more emotional. He's feeling the same way, but at the same time, my mom's behavior was quite unreasonable. We truly don't know if what I did was right or if it was just stress-induced. I'm not sure if I need to apologize to my mom for acting this way. We really don't know what to do, so we're here to ask for your help in resolving this situation. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. I have a lot to share in this update. First of all, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post and made me realize that, while my mom's behavior was unacceptable, I also kept mentioning how stressed I was with work and the wedding, which wasn't normal either. Over the past week and a half, my fiancé and I have done a lot of reflecting, and we believe we need to significantly downsize our wedding. Of course, I'm not talking about anything we've already paid for, but mostly the guest list. The number of people we were planning to invite was nearly 200, and both of us were really stressed because it was a lot of people to accommodate and consider their preferences. It was also extremely expensive. After much discussion, we decided to reduce our guest list to just those people we truly want at our wedding, so we can enjoy the day and spend more time with our loved ones. We really didn't need more than 100 people at our wedding. It just didn't make sense because many of those people hadn't even spoken to us in years. Aside from a few messages exchanged on social media, that doesn't justify a wedding invitation, and I think we got a little carried away with the guest list while planning. But don't worry, we've got it under control now. Later this week, we'll finally be sending out the invitations. Now that only the people I truly want at the wedding will be invited, I feel so much less stressed and much better overall. As for work, I decided to take some time off because I'd taken on more than I could handle. I spoke with my employers about it, and they were quite happy that I decided to lighten my workload. They thought I was doing too much at once and didn't need to put myself under so much pressure because they also have other competent employees, and I didn't need to carry everything on my shoulders. So now I'm doing much better, and I'm planning to have a stress-free wedding. I'm really glad I decided to discuss this in this thread because my fiancé and I are both perfectionists, which can make us overly tense without even realizing it. But this thread and the people who commented on my post made me reconsider everything, and now I feel better. As for some guests who definitely won't be on the final list, they are my mom and stepdad. My mom, well, because you've read the original post, and a big reason I came to the conclusion that I needed to cut some people from the guest list was the way she'd been acting and how she was imposing her unrealistic expectations on me. And my stepdad, by extension, because I simply don't feel like having him at the wedding. Without my mom there, I don't think he has any reason to be present. We haven't spoken since I made her cry the other day, and honestly, it's been nice. I was exhausted by her. I also talked to my uncle about her behavior, and he said he wouldn't have had a problem if I replaced him with my stepdad if my mom had insisted. He would have felt really bad, but he wouldn't have made a fuss if my stepdad truly wanted it. I explained to him that it wasn't about what anyone else wanted. It was my wedding, so it was about what I wanted, as it should be. And I wanted my uncle to walk me down the aisle, so my mom should have respected that instead of blowing things out of proportion and making such a big deal out of it that now we're not even speaking just a couple of months before my wedding. To be precise, it's 8 weeks away, and I feel bad that things had to go so wrong, but it's not like I could have avoided it. So I'm just taking it all in and making peace with it. For the record, I haven't blocked my mom anywhere. I mean, I had, but then I unblocked her that same night, so if she wanted to apologize to me, she could have reached out and said sorry. My anger had also calmed down considerably. She's had plenty of time to reflect and reconsider her stance in this whole situation, but none of that has happened, and I'm starting to lose hope that maybe we can reconcile before the wedding. I don't know what else to say, but I really wanted her to be there on my wedding day because, despite everything, she's still my mom. And up until now, we've always had a good relationship. I don't know why she's ruining it at this point, but I'm truly disappointed by how things have turned out. The only thing I can do is cross my fingers and hope we can work things out in the coming weeks before the wedding. And hopefully, everything will go smoothly. Even if it doesn't, I'm still marrying the love of my life, so I know everything will be fine. Update 2. I finally sent out the invitations a few days ago, and as I mentioned, my mom and stepdad didn't receive one. They were furious. I guess they'd been asking around if other members of our family had received their wedding invitations or not, and when they found out that most of the people I wanted at my wedding had received theirs, they were livid. I can understand and excuse my stepdad being surprised about not being invited because, while we weren't very close, we were still family. Plus, he wasn't aware of what my mom had done, but I don't understand my mom's reaction. I don't know why she was so shocked because over the last 2 weeks, we'd barely spoken. The last time I saw her, we didn't end that meeting on good terms, and I'd also informed her well in advance that I wouldn't invite her to the wedding because of her behavior. So I don't understand why she felt the need to show up at my house in the morning with my stepdad and try to get answers out of me. This time, they also arrived just as I was about to leave for work, probably on purpose, because she wanted to annoy me even more. Luckily, I had the day off today, so I had all the time in the world to deal with this nonsense. Plus, my fiancé was here, unlike the last time this happened. So, when they arrived, we invited them inside, and although they'd already started yelling at us, we decided to handle this with dignity and civility because I didn't want to start yelling too and turn this into a shouting match. It just wouldn't make sense. So, we let them express all their disappointment loudly before we began to speak. Once my mom and stepdad finished expressing their disappointment, quite loudly I must say, I first addressed my stepdad and explained there were several reasons why the two of them hadn't been invited to the wedding. I was sure he didn't know because my mom wanted to appear like the good person here, so she'd made it seem like everything was my fault without mentioning what she'd done. One look at his face told me that my mom hadn't, in fact, told him anything about what she'd done to create the situation. So, I informed him about how she'd insisted I should replace my uncle with him to walk me down the aisle, and then I explained exactly why I didn't want to do that. He never made much effort to build a strong relationship with me, and even if he had, it wouldn't have mattered because my uncle has been there for me since I was a child, so it's a completely different bond. I hoped my mom would understand that at some point, but she never did, and she didn't respect what I said. So, I had already told her I didn't want her at my wedding, and it was about time he knew that too. From that point on, he stayed silent because he hadn't known this part of the story. Then I turned to my mom and began talking to her. I told her she already knew about my decision beforehand, so there really wasn't any need to make such a fuss about it now. She hadn't bothered to fix the situation by apologizing to me, even though I hadn't specifically blocked her, because I hoped she would at least reach out to say she understood where I was coming from and wouldn't pressure me into doing something I didn't want to do. However, that message never came, and now she won't be attending my wedding either. I thought I was being quite fair, but still she kept yelling at me, calling me an ungrateful daughter, and saying she deserved better to try to make me feel guilty. But at a certain point, I just felt irritated. I guess it was obvious that my fiancé and I weren't interested in talking to her, so my stepdad grabbed her by the arm and told her we weren't even worth her time. Then they left, and after they were gone, I finally blocked both of them. To be honest, I feel relieved that it's over now. I hope they leave me alone after this. Update 3. There are 3 weeks left until my wedding, and I have another update about a conversation I had with my mom. She came to my house again yesterday, this time alone. She said she wanted us to talk mother to daughter and for me to let her fix the situation. She apologized for everything that had happened, and even for the things she said to me. She really seemed to want to mend our relationship, but I guess those were empty words because what happened next didn't align with that apology. She told me she was okay with my stepdad not walking me down the aisle, and that my uncle could do it, but that I shouldn't take away her chance to meet someone she admired so much. If you remember from my first post, among the guests was a friend of my mother-in-law's who works in real estate. She was going to attend so my mom could connect with her. But after everything that happened and the guest list being cut down, I didn't see the point in inviting her anymore. My mom wasn't going to be there, and we needed a shorter list, but my mom didn't know this. I told her that since we had downsized the wedding, partly due to everything that happened, which was partly her fault, we hadn't sent an invitation to that guest. She looked shocked for a few seconds until she reacted and said I couldn't do that to her. She said she had really been looking forward to meeting her to network and continue advancing in her career. My response was that since she had apologized, she and her husband could come, but my uncle would still walk me down the aisle. As for the special guest, I told her it was too late to invite her now, and the preparations were too far along to make changes. That's when she went crazy again and started insulting me. I told her it seemed like her career was more important than my wedding, and that if anyone was to blame for the changes, it was her, because her tantrums caused them. I also reminded her that she wasn't invited after all. She refused to listen to reason and kept raising her voice while I raised mine, telling her to leave already, but she wouldn't. In the end, I threatened to call the police and started dialing. When she heard me talking to the operator, she grabbed her purse and left. Honestly, this woman has a lot of nerve because it's my wedding, and so far all I've heard from her are demands and complaints. Classic narcissist behavior. Her priorities are very clear, so in the future, I won't ask my mother-in-law to help her connect with this person either. First, because my mom doesn't deserve it, and second, because my mother-in-law shouldn't risk her reputation by associating with her. Update 4. I got married 2 days ago, and everything went exactly as I had hoped and planned for months. I think downsizing the guest list was an excellent idea because we were able to talk to everyone present and spend time with them. It wasn't too crowded, and everything was truly pleasant and dreamy. I did miss my mom a little despite everything, but my uncle and my husband were there to comfort me and remind me they would always be there for me. That made me feel a bit better about the situation, and eventually I forgot about it when I hit the dance floor. In short, we had a fantastic time, and I truly have no regrets. Now, my husband and I will leave for our honeymoon in a few days, and I know it's going to be absolutely perfect. I just know. Update 5. We're back from our honeymoon, and when we visited my mother-in-law's house to catch up and share about our vacation, she told us something about my mom. She hadn't said anything earlier because she knew about our issues and didn't want to ruin our honeymoon, but now that we were back, she told us my mom had called her. She wanted to ask her for the favor of introducing her to that person she was so interested in meeting. If you read a previous update, you'll remember she even went crazy when she found out I didn't invite her, as that seemed to be her only intention all along. But my mother-in-law knows how unhinged my mom can be, so she told her she wouldn't do anything of the sort and then hung up. I can't blame my mother-in-law. She knows how out of control my mom can be, and introducing her to someone important could be a problem. But she also did it as a favor to me since we get along very well, and she supports me in every way she can.